I want to tell you about a patient. She's 62 years old. She's had type 2 diabetes for 11 years. She takes metformin twice a day, or at least that is what our chart says. What our chart does not say is that she takes it once a day. Not because she forgot, not because she's been difficult, but because the label is in English and she assumed it followed the same pattern as our other medications. One pill once a day. This is what made sense to her. Our A1C has not moved in 3 years. Nobody asked about the label. Nobody asked about the language. Nobody asked what she understood. So that story is not unusual. It's not even rare. It's happening right now in clinics and pharmacies and living rooms across the country, in Spanish, in Asian Creole, in Yoruba, in Tagalog. And we keep calling it non-compliance. But here's what I've learned as a pharmacist. Most of what we call non-compliance is actually a communication failure, a cultural failure, a system that was designed for one kind of patient and never fully made room for everyone else. So today, we're going to talk about the gap. We're going to talk about diabetes medications and the foods that interact with them, not in the abstract, but in the specific. That's plantain, tortillas, the herbs your abuela swears by, the foods that are not just food, they're your identity, their memories, their family, and their love. And we're going to talk about what happens when the healthcare system asks patients to choose between their culture and their health, and why that is the wrong questions entirely. So today, my guest has spent her career refusing to accept that choice. She's one of the most respected voices in cultural competent diabetes nutrition counseling in the United States. And I wanted to have this conversation with her for a long time. So stay tuned. Welcome to When Food Meets Medicine, the podcast where we explore one of the most important and most overlooked conversations in healthcare. How what you eat affects how your medication work, and how the choices we make at the table shapes the health we carry for a lifetime. I'm Dr. Remi, founder of Pharmaplan System, and someone who believes that the prescription part is only half the story. The other half is sitting on your kitchen table. Today's guest is Lorena Drago. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist, a certified diabetes care and education specialist, and one of the foremost authorities on culturally competent nutrition counseling for Latino and multicultural communities in the United States. She holds a Master of Science degree in nutrition and has spent decades working at the intersection of diabetes management, food culture, and health equity. She's the author of Hispanic American Healthy Eating Patterns, a landmark resource that takes traditional Latino food seriously as both a cultural reality and a cultural asset. She's been a national speaker, educator, advocate for a more intelligent, more human approach to diabetes nutrition, and she runs her own practice, and her work has shaped how thousands of clinicians think about the patient sitting across from them, the one whose grandmother's recipe is not a problem to be solved, but a starting point for a real conversation. So Lorena, welcome to Where Food Meets Medicine.
Thank you very much, Remi.
I'm going to ask this. You've been a registered dietitian and diabetes educator for decades, and your work is specifically focused on Latino and multicultural populations. What is the one thing you wish every prescriber understood about the relationship between cultural food and diabetes medication outcomes?
I think that one thing that it is very important is at least to understand how important food is to everyone who has diabetes, and that it goes beyond just nourishment. It means that they are not just counting carbohydrates, they're navigating their family's expectations. They are also thinking about their culture. They're thinking about what brings them joy. And at the same time, it means sacrifice to a lot of degrees. So they still want to feel better, but they don't want to have to eliminate so many things that are near and dear to their heart. So there has to be a balance. And when prescribers, when healthcare professionals tell them that they cannot eat, that is taken away. And what is the replacement? So there has to be some sort of balance. And if there is not a replacement, the patient is going to replace it with something else if there is not an education component. And when there is not an education component, when there is nothing else for the patient is going to make decisions that are not necessarily the right decisions for the patient. And when it comes to medication, it is important to provide education about what are those food-food interactions sometimes, or medication interactions that the patient may not know. And the patient cannot ask questions because you don't know what you don't know. So when the patient now goes home and has those side effects, then the patient most likely will stop the treatment and will not ask questions, but will stop the treatment. So it is paramount that the patient understands what could happen and what to do when those things happen. Then I think that the success rate will probably be higher when you know what to expect.
Makes sense. So when a patient, let's say a patient is newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and they start metformin, what is the first food related conversation you have with them? That maybe their doctor probably did not have with them.
That's an excellent question because, as you and I know, that is the most common condition that persons with type 2 are prescribed. So the first thing that I do is how many times are they taking their medication? Because one thing that I want to share is that very often metformin is prescribed twice a day. And in my case, I have a very large number of patients who are monolingual or speak very little English, and often their prescriptions are provided in English. The instructions are. So many of them do not realize that they have to take their medications twice a day. So they only take it once a day. So as I review the medication with them, I ensure that they are, first of all, taking it appropriately. So that's step number one. Then afterwards, I ask them, when do you take the medication? And I find that I would say that at least 50% of my patients take the medication before a meal, not after a meal. So we discuss the gastrointestinal effects of the medication. And then that is something that it's very important. Then for those that have had diabetes for a while, then we discuss that in many instances that they may need to take vitamins B12 with the medication. And then we discuss that as well. So those are things that it's important to have conversations about side effects and what other things need to be added to their medication and what other things are important and what foods need to be added to them. And that's also based on the foods that are important. So not just to say, well, vitamin 12 is important, but to actually ask them, what are some things that are important? So, for example, when it comes to B12, it might be liver, might be a good source. But if a lot of people are not running around saying, wow, liver is one of my top 10 foods,
Yeah.
then that might not be the case. But for example, salmon might be a food that a lot of people may consume. And it's a food that I recommend. So if salmon, it's something trout or tuna, then that might be the case.
Yeah, quite important. I remember that in our conversation before today, you described something that I think about a lot as a pharmacist. Patients who self-discontinue insulin after probably an hypoglycemic episode. And when they have these episodes, right? Not because they want to stop, but because they are frightened and no one has told them the difference between a basal and a bolus insulin. How common is that pattern in your practice, and what does it tell us about patients and how to counsel, how to talk to them about not just stopping taking insulin based on this?
So you have hit, Remi, on one of my pet peeves, and I think this is a great way to integrate and collaborate with pharmacists. And I think it's because I see many patients that have been given a prescription in which doctors or healthcare professionals in general prescribe. I'll give you an example. A patient is prescribed a regimen of, let's say, 20 units of basal insulin and then 10 units for breakfast of a prandial insulin, 10 units at lunch, and 10 units at dinner. So those regimens may be easier to prescribe, but they are very rigid. And it doesn't take into account what the patient's glucose is prior to each meal. And it doesn't take into account what the patient is going to eat at each meal. So what happens is that when the patient is going to have a large meal, those 10 units may suffice. But when the patient is not feeling very hungry and that patient is just going to have a cup of yogurt for lunch, and that patient's preprandial blood glucose may be at 110. Those 10 units of insulin may cause hypoglycemia for that patient. And that is very frightening for the patient. So if the patient is no longer very hungry at lunchtime, and the patient is now not eating that much, especially if the patient is also on an anti-obesity medication, that patient becomes frightened with more than one hypoglycemic episode. So what happens is that, again, that patient will discontinue that insulin, whether it's at lunchtime or at dinner time, especially at dinner time, because now the patient is also administering a basal insulin at dinner time. So now you start to see that that patient starts becoming hyperglycemic, and the patient may not know the difference between prandial and basal. So once I start seeing the patient, I start seeing these patterns. And when I ask, why is the patient above target? The first thing the patient says is, well, maybe I just had extra bread. And until I continue probing and asking questions is when I realize that these numbers are not because the patient just had a slice or two of bread.
Yeah.
These numbers look like the patient is not taking medication as prescribed.
Mm.
And so this is when education and having the patient understand the role and providing patient with education about insulin and providing the education about insulin flexibility and not just the 10 units before every meal, regardless of what that glucose number is and how
Yeah.
much the patient is going to eat. That is where that collaboration is paramount.
Yeah. So I want to ask a quick question before. I want you to explain prandial and basal for a patient that doesn't even understand what that means in very easy terms for them to remember.
So I say that basal is the insulin that is always working in the body. Basal is like having that energy that is constantly working by little drips 24 hours a day. It's constantly there in the background, providing you with enough insulin to keep your blood sugar stable throughout the day. It's like having your refrigerator plugged in, and your refrigerator is always working because it's plugged in the electrical outlet. And your prandial insulin is like when you walk into a room and you need more light, but you don't need it all the time. Like you need the energy that your refrigerator needs all the time. When you go into a room like a closet, you need more energy because you need the light at that time that you walk into a closet. So then you turn on the switch and then the room lights up. That is like the insulin that you need at the moment that you eat. So you turn on the light at that moment and then you get everything
Energy.
at once. So that's the prandial. When you eat, your body liberates the amount of insulin according to the amount of food that you eat. So you eat a little amount of food like this, your body liberates this amount of insulin to keep it even. You eat this much, your body liberates this much.
Thank you for that explanation. You made it easy. So sometimes people take the metformin 1000 milligram twice daily dose as a once daily dose because the label is in English. I know we spoke about that. And they assumed it follows the same pattern as their other medications. So how much of what we call non-compliance is actually a language and health literacy failure on the part of the healthcare system?
I think that it is important to, when a patient is filling out a prescription, there might be a need to ask preferred language. So is there a system that each pharmacy should have for that? Is it feasible? I think that the answer is probably yes. Now, who would be responsible for that? Is the patient responsible for asking, do you have this in Spanish? Or the pharmacist should offer it as a service to the patient. So would I know if that service is offered unless the pharmacist provides it for me? Like now we offer this service. I think many people don't know whether it's feasible, whether it's something that the pharmacist can do. Like anything else, like I wouldn't know that my pharmacist is offering vaccines, for example, unless the pharmacist is advertising that they are offering a service. So I think that the pharmacist can offer that the labels can be printed in another language. And what languages are those? I know that in certain communities, I know that the instructions are in Spanish because they serve such a large population that speak languages other than English that they realize that is a benefit for the community because they serve such a large population. So I know that it is feasible to do so.
Yeah. From my side of the L, I think it takes the three. And when I say these three, it takes the doctor, the pharmacist, and the patient. There's more languages added where the labels read that. But sometimes we get prescriptions before the patient gets there, but the doctor puts it on the prescription to see, can you, put the language, put Spanish instead of English or whatever language the patient. And yes, sometimes some questionnaires when you come, They ask you what language you'd rather, and that helps. But I want to pause here for a moment because this is something I feel strongly about as a pharmacist. I know that metformin taken once instead of twice daily does not just mean a missed dose. It means consistently subtherapeutic blood glucose control. It means an A1C that does not move. It means a patient who's blamed for a problem that was created by a label in a language that they do not read. And that is a medication safety issue. I think it's preventable by us asking these questions also when the patient is there. I think it's preventable when the doctor, especially if they serve that community and they're sending an electronic prescription, they can put it on it because most of those prescriptions, like I said, come to us before the patient gets there.
I do see it when I have a patient that has had diabetes for a longer period of time and they have been taking metformin for a long period of time and they present with a hemoglobin A1C of 9.5 and the goal is 7. So we are talking about a 2.5 above the goal.
Well,
And they have been taking metformin for 2 years and they have been taking 1 pill per day instead of 2. So that clearly shows that they have been under medicating themselves because they did not know that it said twice instead of once. So we're talking about individuals that have low health literacy. They are unable to understand that this is what it says. And until they have seen a diabetes educator, no one has reconciled or asked them. Maybe they have asked the question, have you been taking your medications? And they have said yes, because they have, but no one has said, how many times are you taking your medications?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
just asking that questions, because many times we are assuming that they are taking their medications appropriately
Correct. Yeah.
because they have not worked with individuals with low health literacy.
Correct. Correct.
And what I did want to add, because this has not happened, but it has happened. The word once a day is written ONCE, but the word ONCE in Spanish means 11. And there was one case in which someone that saw that in that instruction, take once a day, so once, which in Spanish is once,
11.
and thought that they had to take once, 11 pills. So clearly, it doesn't happen that often. Some people, even though they see once, recognize that it's in English. So it's not once like in Spanish. But there has been cases in which once was thought of as 11. So yes, these are some of the issues that may occur. Not often, but it has occurred.
Yeah, it could happen. Many of your patients use natural remedies alongside their prescribed medications.
Yes.
Their teas, their supplements, herbals, without disclosing this to their prescriber or pharmacist. What are the most common and most dangerous interactions you see between traditional remedies and diabetes medications?
Okay. So that's a great question, Remi. So many times there are a lot of teas. So one common tea across many countries in Latin America is chamomile tea, which is té de manzanilla, and that may not be disclosed unless you specifically ask, which I do have in my assessment questionnaire, do you drink coffee and tea? And when they say tea, and this is the part about cultural sensitivity, cultural humility, whatever you want to ask is, what types of teas do you use? Do you use, tell me all the type of teas, and chamomile tea um, dermatology may have an interaction with warfarin. So you need to pay attention to that or some any other kinds of teas. Because if they might say, well, there might be some teas from Mexico and I'm not Mexican. So I don't know, even though I'm Hispanic,
Yeah.
there are many different Hispanic countries. And that's
Mm.
another thing that I also want to say. Just because we are Hispanic does not, we are not homogeneous. There are many
Mm.
different, not just differences among our countries, there are differences within our countries. So it's always important for us to investigate what does it mean, this kind of tea, this kind of herb, and we need to investigate as clinicians. Many times there is a lot of green juices. Many of my patients from different states in Mexico believe in green juices. And green
Mm.
juices have many different components depending
Mm.
on what each person wants to add into it.
Yeah.
So again, with warfarin and vitamin K, it's about consistency. You don't want to one day have very little consumption of vitamin K, the next day
Yeah.
very high consumption. So you
Yeah.
want consistent consumption of vitamin K. So
Yeah.
if they have green juice, you want to find out what do you add to your green juice and make sure that you have consistent intake of vitamin K foods so that you don't have ups and downs. So that's something else that is important. Many persons with diabetes take ACE inhibitors and, normal for most people, normal potassium is not an issue. And many times potassium from ultra processed foods, that's when there's a problem. So many times they hear that they cannot eat certain of traditional foods like avocado, especially beans. Beans are extremely nutritious.
Yeah.
So they should not have any issues with beans or plantains or cassava or potatoes or tomato-based products. They should continue using it. But there are certain things that may cause hypoglycemia,
Yeah.
like for example, aloe. They do use aloe and nopal, which is cactus petals, especially. And now I am specifically talking about Mexicans, which they do use cactus petal. There are some studies in that has shown that about half a cup or more of cactus petals combined with foods may has shown some sort of hypoglycemic effect
Mm.
with that. So I
Yeah.
always tell them to check their blood glucose before and after a meal and
Yeah.
see how it affects them.
Yeah.
And then this way they will know whether they have a 10-point, 20-point drop after
Yeah.
they incorporate their cactus battle in their
Yeah.
meal.
Maybe a meal makes absolute sense.
Hmm.
So now let's talk about the medications themselves because the pharmacology is actually genuinely important. And I want to talk about GLP-1 agonists like your Ozempic, your Monjaro.
Yes,
They've transformed diabetes management dramatically because
absolutely.
yeah, they slow your gastric emptying significantly. So how does that change the food conversation for your patients, especially those eating traditional high fiber, high volume meals?
Yes. So my first approach, Remi, I want to know, first of all, if they're taking it. That's number one, not just because I see it there on the chart. I want to make sure how they're taking it. Remember, that's also another concern is if they are taking it, then I want to make sure that they are administering it correctly. I go through the entire process. Then after that, I want to know if they're experiencing any of the side effects. After I go through all the side effects, at least the most common ones, nausea, vomiting, stomachache, diarrhea, or constipation. Most of the time, they are experiencing some nausea, usually after the administration of it. That first day, second day, that might
Yeah.
be the case. Then we do some management of the nausea. And then I want to hear about a typical day of what they eat. I want to concentrate on how they eat, how often, and what they eat. So one of the things that I want to make sure is that they have a balanced meal. We want to make sure that they have adequate amount of protein and using the foods that they like, that they can afford, and then building around it. So usually it will be whatever they're having, if they're having fish, if they're having chicken, etc. And then most of them use beans. So I focus on beans on any kind, whether they are dry beans, they are economical, and
Yeah.
they provide the nutrients that people need, and they have
Yeah.
protein as well. So that's where I add them. If they need any more, protein nutrients, I have them add soy into their meals. And then, of course, vegetables. Many of them are afraid of fruits because they have been told that it's too sweet. So I have
Mm.
to educate them about incorporating fruits into their meals
Yeah.
and remove sweetened beverages and small meals throughout the day
Yeah.
and just focus on nutrient dense foods.
Okay. Good. So I want to talk about SGLT2 inhibitors too, like Jardians and
Yes.
Januvia, because I know they increase the risk of diabetic ketoacidosis in certain situations, including fasting. How do you counsel patients who fast, whether for religious reasons, cultural practice, or just regular intermittent fasting trends on the risk of it?
Yes. With that, mostly enforce hydration. Very important to enforce hydration. So, a part of my assessment is to find out about beverages, how much water they have. Again, the teas, as I had mentioned before, how much coffee they have, whether they
Yeah.
have juices or all the types of beverages that they consume. I
Yeah.
had one patient recently that she was on two different types of SGLT2 inhibitors, and
Mm.
she developed a yeast infection with one and a rash with the other. So it was discontinued on both, and she was not drinking enough water
Yeah.
with one. So, yeah, I think
Okay.
she
So
was the only one I have had that
so
she
far.
had both of them discontinued.
Yeah. I think this is one I do want to make sure that our listeners hear clearly. If you're on an SGLT2 inhibitors like Januvia or Jardians, and you're planning to fast, please talk to your pharmacist or physician first because the risk of euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis is real. It is under-recognized and it can even happen when your blood sugar looks normal. So do not fast on these medications without guidance. So we go back to metformin. I know it's associated with vitamin B12 depletion over time. So what foods do you prioritize for your patients on long-term metformin, and how do you communicate that risk in a way that patients actually act on it?
Yeah, I usually recommend that they take B12, especially if they are elderly, simply because there's also the intrinsic factor issue, lack of stomach acidity. So that might be a little bit more troublesome. And also if they are on a GLP-1 and they are not eating enough. When it comes to certain foods, B12 is mostly a vitamin that it's found mostly in animals. And then of course you can still get vitamin B12 in certain plant foods that have been enriched. So you can still have that.
Yeah.
But if, for example, if they have chicken dishes, fish, like
Yeah.
I said before, milk, or yogurt or cheese. And then for vegetarians or vegans, fortified breakfast cereals. You can also have it if they are not drinking milk for whatever reason, then they can have it in soy milk. And some of the meat substitutes, they can have that as well. And like I said before, if they want to try salmon, salmon would be a good source of B12.
Yeah.
If they like liver, but like I mentioned before, I don't know a lot of people that like liver
Liver.
or they have it that
I
often.
don't think I know anyone that likes liver.
Well, I do like liver, so I
Oh,
think
well, now I know one person.
none of the people, but even though I do like liver, I don't
Mhm.
buy it.
Yeah.
So I don't cook it. And it's not something that you go out and you find it in restaurants.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I don't even remember the last time that I had liver. So it's not something that I eat often, but
Yeah.
people would eat salmon, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's high in omega 3s. And
Yeah.
I do recommend more omega 3s, whether you have them in a supplement or you have them in salmon. I do recommend it.
Mm,
So whether it's tuna, and people eat tuna as well.
yeah.
So I think that that's probably a more realistic way
Yeah. Yeah.
of getting the vitamin B12.
Okay. So there's a growing body of evidence on the glycemic index of traditional Latino food. And I'm talking about white rice, beans, plantain, tortillas, or tamales. What does the clinical evidence actually say about this food in the context of diabetes management? How do you navigate the gap between that evidence and the cultural reality?
Well, with the glycemic index, the glycemic load, it's probably a better tool than the glycemic index because the glycemic load takes into account the portion of the food that you're going to eat. So the glycemic index is the number that it's based on just the food, but the glycemic load takes into account what the portion is. So I think that that is a better measure
Okay.
of that. Then the other thing with it is, yes, anything that has a slow and nice curve after you eat and doesn't spike blood glucose levels certainly is better for someone that has diabetes. I think the only exception is when you have low blood glucose, you want something to bring your blood glucose levels
Mm,
very
done.
quickly.
Yeah.
Other
Yeah.
than that, I tell my patients, you want to choose foods that do not spike your blood glucose, but it's a nice and slow slope. And I just go like this. You want it to be nice and slow. So I
Yeah.
tell them something like beans, like lentils, it's just nice and slow.
Yeah.
So you want that to happen. And so you want to choose foods that are nutrient dense. You want to choose foods that have fiber, and you want to make sure that the total amount of carbohydrates that you are eating are small portions. And the best way to know is to measure your blood glucose 2 hours after you eat.
Yeah.
And let that be your guide of what is the right amount for you.
Yeah.
So I share with them what are some of the nutrient dense foods in the foods that they like to eat. And that's how I individualize the diets of my patients.
Yeah.
I ask them to share with me based on their culture, their foods that they can afford, and the foods that they like, where they shop. And based on that,
Hmm.
I say these are foods that are nutrient dense. And then based on that, I make the recommendations.
Yeah.
So then that makes it very tailored for them.
Makes sense.
I
Yeah.
don't bring anything that it's pre-made.
Yeah.
for them. I make it based on the recommendations. Whatever
Yeah.
I bring to them,
Yeah.
that it's pre-made, it's based on general regions,
Yeah.
but it's mostly based on what they tell me.
Yeah. It's something they're used to. So you're not bringing something strange to them.
No.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense, makes it more acceptable. So I just want to mention this. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Levels, and I want to mention them here because what Lorena just described is that some of the problems that Level was built to solve, some of the stuff we've spoken about. And I know that one of the most common questions I get as a pharmacist is that how do I actually know which foods are affecting my blood sugar? Not in theory, in my body, with my meals, with my medications. And that's exactly what Levels is designed to help you understand. It is a metabolic health app that provides access to the Stilo glucose biosensor, the first FDA cleared over the counter glucose biosensor available without a prescription. And it shows you in real time how your meals impact your glucose level. So instead of guessing, you have data. So for listeners who want to understand how the foods we talk about on this show actually behave in their body, that kind of personalized insight is genuinely useful, not as a substitute for your care plan, but as a way to see your body's response to the foods you actually eat. So if you want to try it out, check out Levels at levels.link/Dr. Remi. I'll put the link in the show notes. Listeners will get 2 months free on an annual membership through that link. I want to be clear. Levels is a general wellness app. It is not a medical device. It does not substitute for your diabetes care plan or guidance of your pharmacist or physician or your dietitian. It is a food awareness tool and a genuinely useful one. So, Lorena, let me zoom out for a moment because what you are describing is just not a clinical challenge, is a trust also challenge with a lot of our patients. Has to trust us. They have to trust that what we're saying or what they're saying to us, we are hearing them and we're giving them a practical solution to a problem. So you've spoken extensively about cultural humility in diabetes nutrition counseling. What does that look in practice when you're sitting across from a patient whose food culture is central to their identity and their family life? How does that look like?
What it looks like in practice is as follows. Let's say, Remi, that you are my patient
Mhm.
and you come to me. So I may not know exactly what your traditional eating habits are,
Right.
but as someone that practices cultural humility every single day, I have to be open to learning from you
Mhm.
because everyone who practices with cultural humility has to be open and willing to learn every single day and be willing to understand what are your health beliefs and practices and be able to ask questions and work with you.
Mm.
And by doing so, I allow you to explain things to me so that I know that you are an expert in the foods that you are eating, that you're
Mhm.
preparing, that you're enjoying.
Yeah.
And I am the professional that will be able to give you the tools so that you can manage diabetes and
Yeah.
whatever health condition,
Yeah.
but it will
Yeah.
be centered on the foods that you enjoy and your traditions. And when I am providing you with the counseling, I am going to be explaining to you why we're making the changes. Well, why you're making the changes. And that by providing you with that explanation and you're going to be making the changes, you're going to understand why I'm providing you with the recommendations.
Yeah. I
And
like that.
I am going to help you achieve
Yeah.
optimal health while you are going to hopefully be able to maintain most of the traditions in your culture.
Yeah.
And whatever I don't know about it, I am going to investigate.
I like that. I like that a lot. Many of your patients come from communities where the healthcare system has historically been dismissive. It's been dismissive about their food choices.
I
Apart
think
from what,
it's because
go
they
ahead.
don't understand, and because they don't understand and they don't have the time
Mm.
to understand, we like to stay with what we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think human nature likes to keep and work within the familiar.
Yeah. Comfortable. The comfort zone.
Yes, with the familiar. So
Yeah.
they understand that this is the model that I studied.
Yeah.
This is the model that I know works. So I feel that if this works, then I will adopt it. And then the patient has to adopt it too.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And I totally agree. I think we're just all animals of nature. We have a specific thing we're comfortable with. It's very difficult to change that pattern with what you're used to. But there's a specific challenge with patients managing diabetes while also navigating food insecurity. So the foods that are most accessible and affordable are often the most problematic sometimes for glycemic control. How do we approach that reality clinically and practically?
That's a excellent question, Remi. And the majority of my patients, like I said, not only do they have low health literacy, many times they also have low income.
Yeah.
And one of the assessment questions that I include in the assessment is the food insecurity question, which is in the last 12 months, have you been worried that you are running out of food and that you cannot buy more? And the answer is yes or no. And that's one of the validated questions about food insecurity. So if the answer is yes, have you run out of food and you didn't have money to buy more? So if the answers are yes to those two questions, then that means that that person or family may be food insecure. Then
Mm.
I find out if are they receiving food stamps. If the answer is no, then we assist them with the applications with food stamps. If the
Mm.
person is unable to, if they still need more assistance, then we provide them with a website in which they can enter their zip code. And it used to be called Aunt Bertha, but now is findhelp.org. And you can just enter your zip code and you can check for food pantries in where they live
Yeah.
and find information. Sometimes they're open once a week, twice a week, and they can have access to different food pantries.
Could you repeat that again? Because I would like it in the show notes so that
Yes,
anyone that
yes,
needs to.
absolutely. And I just want to, it is called Find Help, one word,
Okay.
.org,
Okay.
findhelp.org, and it's excellent.
Okay. So we'll
Once
put that in
you
the notes.
enter findhelp.org, it's a website that you can find information about food, housing, transit, health, education, and I use it all the time for my patients, mostly for food. You
Yeah.
enter your zip code,
Mm.
and there are food pantries, organizations there, and patients can actually go there. There are many different types of food pantries. Some of them are excellent
Yeah.
that patients can go there for assistance.
Okay.
Some of
So
them
we'll put that in
all,
the links. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Because
excellent.
that's good because a lot of people don't know these things and they need to know.
Yes,
So,
they
as a
do.
you'd mentioned the collaboration between pharmacists and dietitians. As a pharmacist, I see the medication side of diabetes management every day. As a dietitian and CDCES, you see the nutrition and the behavior side. Where do you think the biggest gaps are in pharmacist dietitian collaboration for diabetes patients, and what would an ideal integrated care model look like?
I would love to see a way in which that there could be a way in which, let's say, whether it's through an EMR, something that when I see a patient
Hmm.
and I see that patient X has issues with whether it's herbal remedies and food, whether it's medication issues, that I know that this patient would benefit from having a pharmacist consultation that we could connect, that there could be a way that I can send a brief note or maybe, and I could say, pharmacist consultation on the following. And there could be a way that we could connect for a consultation for a patient. That instead of working in silos, that there could be a mechanism that we could connect with our pharmacist, that there could be this collaboration, this education would be ideal.
So that's
it's
so
feasible for sure.
definitely. And this is where I would come in with the MediMeal Safe app and MediMeal Plan. So the MediMeal Safe app is an app that helps you with food drug interactions, like a pharmacist in your pocket. And the MediMeal Plan is like a dietitian and a pharmacist in your pocket, where it generates a meal plan for you based on your health conditions like diabetes. It creates a meal plan for your food where you don't have interactions for that. So I'm going to ask you another question. When a patient comes to you already on a complex diabetes medication regimen, let's say they have metformin plus a GLP-1, plus a SGLT2, plus a statin, plus a ACE inhibitor, how do you prioritize the food drug interaction conversation? What do you address first?
The metformin, GLP-1, SGLT2 inhibitor. I do the GLP-1 first, metformin, and then SGLT2.
So I want to end with something a little different. And we call it rapid fire round. It's short questions. The first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready, Lorena, for rapid fire?
I'm ready for you, Remi.
So the first question, white rice, yes or no for a patient on metformin?
Yes, but this is not as rapid as you're going to want to.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, but what I always tell my patients when they ask me about things that they can or cannot eat, okay? So the question is not, can you eat rice? But how much can I eat of anything?
Yeah.
That's what it is. How much can I eat of anything?
I like that answer. Okay, so a patient on semaglutide, and if they ask you, can they still eat at their grandmother's Sunday dinner? What do you tell them?
Absolutely. Food is more than nutrition, like I said before. Food is about family, is about culture, is about connection. Just listen to your body's fullness signals. That's what it is. Don't overdo.
I like that. One food that you wish every diabetes patient would add to their diet tomorrow?
Definitely beans. Not just for diabetes, every single person. All types of legumes, black beans, pinto beans, lentils, red beans, garbanzos, beans. I think they add longevity.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great food.
One food myth about diabetes that you would like to permanently retire if you had the power.
Oh my God, I love that. But I have more than one. But I'll tell you my number one. Please, that people with diabetes cannot eat fruit because it has too much sugar. I wish that can retire. And another one, that people, especially my patients from Mexico and El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras, that people with diabetes cannot eat tortillas. That is a lie.
Well, thank you for that. So if a patient could do only one thing to improve their diabetes medication outcomes through food, what would it be?
That be consistent with your meals, okay? Eat balanced meals throughout the day and take your medications consistently. And if something happens that the medication does not, quote unquote, agree with you, or you're having problems with the medication, call your doctor, go to the pharmacy, speak with someone because instead of stopping the medication completely
Yeah.
and then not taking the medication. Don't do that. Please speak to someone because the medication can be changed, the dose can be changed, but not stopping, stopping the medication is not the answer.
Thank you so much. Thank you for playing the rapid fire. Thank you for being here. If people want to reach out to you, where's the best place so we can put it in the link notes?
They can email me at Lorena at diabetesontheweb.com, and they can find me on Instagram at Lorena Drago.
Thank you, Lorena Drago, for being here. It's been an honor having you here.
It has been fun.
Thank you. To close the show, I do want to say three things. And three things I want you to take from today's conversation. I want you to understand that non-compliance is often a communication failure, not a patient failure. When someone takes their metformin once instead of twice because the label is in English and they assumed it followed the same pattern as their other medication, that is a system failure, not a patient failure. And the fix is not a better patient. The fix is a better system. Number two, cultural food is not the enemy of diabetes management. Arroz Pollo is not the problem. Plantains are not the problem. The problem is a clinical conversation that asks patients to abandon their food culture instead of walking within it. Lorena has spent her career showing us that walking within it is not just possible, it's actually more effective. Number three, which is the third and last one, the food-drug interaction conversation has to happen before the prescription is written, not after blood sugar goes up. The first food conversation has to happen at diagnosis, not at the first A1C recheck, not after the third medication change, at diagnosis. So, if you are managing diabetes or if you love someone who is, I hope today's episodes gave you language for a conversation you've been trying to have. If you love this episode, I would want you to subscribe. You can find Lorena's works at lorenasfix.com. She also has resources specifically designed for Spanish-speaking patients and for clinicians who work with the Latino community. I do want to say, if you want to check your own medications and food for interactions in English or Spanish, MediMealSafe is available at pharmaplansystems.com. You can search any medication, any food, get a plain language explanation of what to watch for, and it is free to try it at first. Thank you for listening to When Food Meets Medicine. If today's episode was useful to you, share it with someone who needs it. And that's how the show grows, one conversation at a time. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon. So until next time, eat smart, your meds matter, and your body will love you for it. Thank you.